Hello, everybody. It's Michael Hart coming back again with another great interview. Today is a really kind of special one that's near and dear to my heart. My friend Sue Williams is here, and we're going to talk about her own educator's journey from whole language to direct phonics instruction. And I think she's got a wonderful story to tell, and I think she can be very inspiring for a lot of us in the community who are trying to create that kind of path and map for themselves as well. So I'm going to say hi to Sue in a minute, but I just want to talk a little bit about her bio. Sue is a reading interventionist. She currently works with students at the Sylvan Park Tutor, which is her personal tutoring company here in Nashville, her own private practice. But she's a very busy woman. She also works with students at the Laughlin Design Center, which is a local magnet school, as well as she sees kids at a really fabulous place in Nashville called Learning Matters, which is a nonprofit tutoring and assessment center. And I'm very, very happy she's there because they're one of our top resources in this area. So for 17 years, Sue was a classroom teacher for children in grades 3 through 6. But she's also the mother of a young man who has confronted the challenges of dyslexia through his entire life. And this perspective heightened her awareness of the special needs and strengths of students, specifically with dyslexia. She was so frustrated, and I think many of you share this frustration, that so many of her students couldn't read at grade level. And at that point in time, the school district didn't even recognize dyslexia to be a reading disability. So Sue started looking for a better way to teach reading, especially to students with dyslexia. She studied the groundbreaking research of Wharton and Gillingham, as well as the research on brain functioning from resources such as Sally Shaywitz and Dehane. Dehane is based in Paris, and he's doing some very, very top-notch work right now. As Sue learned more, she evolved from being a whole language, content-focused educator to really an enthusiastic proponent of multisensory direct instruction of phonics. So as a result, Sue's positively impacted countless students to overcome reading and language comprehension deficits. That in turn has built their self-esteem in these students, and the means to succeed in the classroom and beyond. So formally, Sue's received her master's in education from Belmont University, here again based in Nashville. She trained in Wharton Gillingham instruction with Marissa Bernard, and she is CERI certified, C-E-R-I certified by the International Dyslexia Association. So welcome, Sue. Great to have you. Thank you very much for taking the time when you're so busy.
Oh, hi, how are you? Happy to be here. I was waiting for my cue, and I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention well enough, but
that's no big deal.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
You bet, you bet. So let's jump into it, because this is, Sue and I are friends, and we're sitting around one night, and we're talking about this experience we've had for literally decades, and I thought that she would be a great person to talk about this really fundamental challenge we have in our education system, which is that there's this massive disconnect, as many of us know, between what we know from the science of reading instruction and the actual instructional approaches that are being used in the regular classrooms. So I'm hoping to unravel that a bit with Sue today in her own personal and professional journey. So here's the conundrum. Sue, by all accounts, you have been a caring and committed teacher for your entire career. And yet, you were not exposed to the importance of explicit, systematic, and intensive instruction for our struggling readers until well into your career. So let's start at the beginning and talk a little bit about what was your experience in university and the early stage professional development that you received when you were starting out as a teacher.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that I went to Belmont University. It has a very strong program to prepare teachers,
Mhm.
and really felt that it was very rigorous. And I did an internship in 2 different schools and felt like a lot of experience with different age groups. And I really felt that I was prepared when I first started teaching. And our focus had been on whole language. So content-based, text-rich, multiple experiences for reading and writing, teacher-led read-alouds, student responses, content. But I really had no experience or no training on how to formally teach phonics, other than take a minute, slow down, sound it out. That's it. That's all I knew. And it really wasn't working. It really wasn't working.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm trying to find somebody to teach me what I need to know to teach kids how to read.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the core story, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you could be the most dedicated teacher in the world, but if you're not exposed to it, you don't know anything about it, then you're
Right.
feeling
Well, so
left.
yeah, my response initially was, well, okay, fine. I'll just read it to them. So
Uh-huh.
I would read everything to them, because I would be in a fifth grade classroom and I would have 5 students out of 26 that really were on a first grade or pre-primer even level in their reading. And they were
Mhm.
not able to read the information we would have when we'd be studying the Aztecs. They would have a great interest. They would love to look at the picture. They were great at making the artifacts. They could not read the text to keep up with the class to prepare a good report.
Mhm.
So at the same time as I'm going through this, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I doing wrong? What's going on? I'm doing everything that my school department is telling me to do. I'm doing guided reading. I'm meeting in small groups. I'm meeting individually. I'm walking around with Post-it notes. I'm like working myself into a frenzy every day, just trying to make sure everybody knows what's going on, knows what they need to know, and have the support for what they need. Now, at the same time, this is my son, Nicholas. We came to realize that has dyslexia. And so we were, as many parents are, um, very surprised. And that, of course, is part of the definition, is that it's out of, you just don't realize it. We come from a professional family. We're reading all the time. I mean, we read books his entire life. He wrote books as a pre-K. He would take his spot and write books. And so when people would say to me, well, he needs more content. He needs to know more what's going on. You need to read to him more. We were reading to him. Yeah, we
Yeah.
were reading to him, and it wasn't transferring.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are a highly educated family, so it was like a bit of it's just completely confusing.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly,
Yeah, it didn't make any
exactly,
sense because you were doing everything you thought you were supposed to be doing, and yet
exactly.
it wasn't
Following
happening.
everybody's directions.
Yeah.
I was even told I went back to speak with one of my professors at Belmont, who I really
Mhm.
do respect. And I was like, what's going on? My son is not reading. I'm like a reading teacher. My son is not reading. And what she told me was, well, it's normal for people to learn how to read between the ages of 2 and 10.
Wow.
That didn't make sense to me. That did
Wow.
not make sense to me. So the first thing I did as a parent is I got together with one of my close friends who's a special ed teacher who actually does specialize in reading, and signed him up for tutoring, because obviously I didn't know what to do. Yeah.
You told me at one point that there was this odd disconnect between um, how you understood what was going on with Nicholas and there's some discussion about phonics, but it was like, no, that's not what he needs. Is that accurate? Is that how it went?
Yeah, it is exactly. I mean, what I was told by his teachers and by my colleagues also. I mean, I'm talking to everybody about this, was that he needs more time, he needs more exposure, and the smart kid, he's going to get it, and he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't get it. So on his first state test, he scored a 3 out of a 100. Okay, a 3.
You know, you
A 3.
understand.
I mean, those were 3 really good guesses, is all I've got to say.
Yeah, no, they were great guesses.
Right, those were 3 great guesses. But it's like, okay, so what? I took him to an outside source for testing, and the result was that he had dyslexia. Okay, this is what they said. So I take that to my school meeting, and they say, well, we don't, dyslexia is not real. We don't do dyslexia. And I was like, well, my son can't read. I have data from a very prominent institution that explains, you know, actually anybody really could understand this if they looked at it. He's not hearing things properly. He's not processing things properly. He can really only understand what you show him or tell him. And it's right there. So again, we started with, they wanted to pull him out of class and work on his spelling. Did not seem right. Did not seem right. And so that's when we actually started tutoring. And as I'm talking to his tutor, I'm saying, well, what did you guys do? What are you doing? You know, because Nicholas will only say we were reading. And so I would ask her, and she said, well, what I'm doing is I'm going through all the sounds that we use in the English language in a systematic method, and I am teaching him these sounds and how they reoccur so he can understand how the English language works. And I was like, wow.
What's that?
That, I don't know how to do that, but that makes sense, because when I don't know how to do something, if somebody takes me back to the beginning, breaks it down for me, I can get one piece at a time. And then you can do
So that was the real turning point for you professionally, not just personally, but professionally.
Exactly.
So how you made a complete shift. So how did you do that? How did you?
Well, I decided that I'm teaching primarily 5th grade. 5th graders should be able to read. If a 5th grader can't read, there's a problem, and they may not have an AP. I may not talk to, you know, the parents may not have come and told me this is going on, but as a teacher, I can see that there is a problem. So I started working with my friend who gave me some advice on how to start this. I started searching for materials, and our guided reading was called guided reading, but it was direct instruction of phonics. And that's what I did. I didn't probably do it exactly the way that it should be. As I continued training and learning more, I realized that it really has to be multisensory. There has to be a lot of repetition. And you have to get a chance to see something multiple times before you can ask them to use that skill that they've learned, maybe the 2 sounds that OO makes, like food and cook, so that then when they come across a word, they can say, oh, is that fa'ad or food? What makes sense? I know there are 2 choices. So if I know there are 2 choices, I can say those words, I can hear those words, and I can pick the word that is set aside.
So
It took a long time. It wasn't easy, and many students, you know, were really doing well. And then I realized I read thing, and I really don't know where. And what it told me was that if you're doing direct instruction, multisensory direct instruction to a small group of children in your class, you can do it to the whole class. Everybody's going to benefit. Everybody's going to benefit from having a better understanding of how the language works. So I made another shift and would do a whole class lesson every day, and then follow that up in the guided reading in the small groups.
Is this before you did the actual training in Norton Gillingham?
It is. It is before I actually did the training in Norton Gillingham. What brought me to that was a shift in the direction I wanted my teaching to go. I was working in inner city schools with kids that were very challenged academically, socially, economically, every way you want to look at it. And I, in all honesty, got tired of fighting the system. what I was being asked to do was not work. What I was doing myself was somewhat effective, not enough. And then I found the Orton Gillingham, started doing that research, taking a course in that, and I realized this makes sense to me. It's research based. There's data to prove that it works. And when I look at that in conjunction with other brain research, I realize that they are fit together perfectly, hand in hand. And so I started only doing that and only teaching reading, and realized how effective it is. And if there is any teacher out there that I can support in any way to make this shift, I would just highly recommend it. There are many different ways to do it. You don't have to do it my way. There are many different ways to do it, and all of your students in your class will have a better understanding of the English language. They will have better comprehension, and they will read better.
I think one of the things you did without really kind of formally knowing it, and I've done this in my career, is that you really did, you focus on formal training in phonological processing, but you're doing more than that without necessarily having a name for it. You're doing more in terms of orthography, you're doing more in terms of morphology, syntax, semantics, all that stuff. That's all the pieces of oral language that are connected to learning how to read. So that's a really important point, because I think we sometimes get really, really focused on just, they think, well, phonological process is going to do it. And
right, and that's a great point, and that kind of goes back to content. I am, fascinated by content of all sorts. Social studies, I love teaching social studies. I love teaching literature because I like to talk about it. I like to talk, and so you have to have something to talk about. So you've got to look at the words. What do the words mean? You can't expand your vocabulary if you don't have some understanding of Latin and Greek roots. This wasn't something that I was ever asked to teach, but to me it made incredible sense. You can learn a few roots. You just watch yourself, 15 words, just the simple one of AUD odd. If you know that has something to do with hearing, way you go. Anytime you see it, it's going to be related to hearing in some way, and you put it in content. You just might be able to get it from context clues, which is not as easy as teachers like to make you think. Context clues do not always work because you don't know what the words mean.
See, so to that point, and we're not going to talk about structured word inquiry today, but it is that whole idea of looking at the etymology of words. And, the English language comes from a lot of different places because the English were controlled by a lot of different cultures, right, over the course of a couple thousand years. So I think that's another really important point that you make, because we tend to get over-organized around just phonology, and we don't talk about etymology enough, because that helps a lot with these really crazy English words that just don't seem to make any sense.
They don't seem to make sense until you dig deep. And I think that it goes with my philosophy of teaching the whole child, teaching the whole person. You can't just teach phonics. You have to kind of start out that way until somebody can make sense of what's going on, until they know, oh, okay, each letter is a sound. These sounds are trying to imitate the way that we speak. That can take quite a while to get to that point. But once you're at that point, you can just branch it out and let the students see how interesting language is, because it really is. And then they do find it quite fascinating that, oh, this came from Old English because it's something we do all the time. Okay, all right. Oh, and this is French because it's super fancy and it has the letters that we don't even care about. Okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So before I start asking some of the last couple of questions, just curiously, how is Nicholas doing now? He's a young adult, right?
Okay, Nicholas is doing very well. Nicholas is 26 right now, and he graduated from college from Tennessee Tech University with a major in metal smithing and metallurgy. So he's an artist. And he is now working, he's gone through an internship to become a tattoo artist. And he now is an independent tattoo artist who works in a very nice shop and continues to be very happy. He also went, just to say, he went from that 3. Remember the score I mentioned earlier, the 3 that just kind of freaked everybody out, to get into college for his entrance exam on the ACT. He received 97 in the language and reading section, which means only 3% of the population are better than he is at reading. That was a game changer right there. That was a game changer right there when he realized not only does my mother say that I can do it, does my tutor say I can do it, but now I'm looking at a document that says I can really do it. And so he was able to take that, and it helped him quite a bit in his approach to college.
It's really important to tell that story because I was just talking to a mom yesterday whose child was just going into high school and struggling like crazy. But super bright, really lovely kid, shines in front of a crowd. And it's like, we just got to find a way to get them through those 4 years coming up. And then the whole world opens up to them. And they can, they can learn how to read and they can learn how to write, but it's also an opportunity for them to just take on the whole world, decide what they want to do. Your son goes into metallurgy, goes into tattooing. It's very successful. He's happy. I mean, people got to know that those stories are out there because it's so scary, right?
It's very scary. And honestly, it's very difficult for the person who is suffering from dyslexia, and I choose the word suffering very carefully. And it is also very, very difficult for the person who is trying to support them. It takes time. It takes time. It doesn't happen in a week. It happens over a long period of time where you are starting to understand how the language works, what rules you can count on, what rules you can't count on. Many of my students, as well as my son Nicholas, know a lot more about language than most people do.
Right.
And that has been a good tool for him.
Yeah, good. I'm glad we talked about that. So let me go to the next question here, which is, so often teachers are vilified, really, basically, for not knowing more about the science of reading, when in many cases it's just been a function of the teacher just not getting access to that information. They could have the biggest heart in the world. They could be the most committed teacher in the world. So we have to be careful not to denigrate or vilify teachers because it's really a structural issue in terms of the education, training, and support that they should be getting. And I'm talking about regular education, not just special ed. Just like you said, you could take a lesson into a classroom full of kids and, you can do that lesson for the entire group. And it's just basically good teaching. And you had to muscle your way through and find a way to do it on your own. And of course, my life's goal and your goal is to continue to find ways for us to be able to help teachers do what I call cross the chasm, which is to find that information, integrate it into their skill set, and basically I call it in the classroom, see what you know, not just know what you see.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So your story is a beautiful example of a professional, I think, who found a way to cross the chasm. So if you could provide a message to the people that are listening today who may have a similar personal or professional journey, what message do you want to leave with them today?
Well, I think I want to make sure that you understand that Fort and Gillingham is not the only way to make this jump, but that multisensory instruction really does align itself with what brain research is telling us. And a lot of teachers just don't know that. They just don't know it. They think that it's perhaps gimmicky to be using a sandbox that has glitter in it to write a letter, but it's not. It's not, you know. If you have to be tactile and kinesthetic, you have to understand the difference between those two. A lot of teachers haven't got that. It's like we need explicit instruction for our students with dyslexia, but our teachers need explicit, direct instruction also. They are very, I think, very, very willing to do it. And when I talk to some younger teachers that I work with, I'll say, well, they'll say, my student's having trouble reading. And I'll say, well, what skills are you covering? And they'll tell me main idea, and they'll tell me, and I'm like, that's really not what I'm talking about. That's important. Comprehension is very important. What I'm really asking is, have you taught about the magic E yet? Do they know how many different ways to write the sound E? And they're like, well, we do a little phonics every day. 5 minutes is what it comes down to. They haven't, no. I mean, we need more professional development to spread the word that this is a way you can teach all students how to read in a more effective manner. Another idea I have, it may be a little controversial, but schools are all about test scores. Schools are all about test scores. That's how they get their money. That's how they maintain their programs. Well, what if everybody in your school can read? What will that do to your test scores? So that might be a way to speak to your principal and say, you know, we really need more support in teaching these kids how to read.
Okay, so let's finish with this. Like you said, it was really a very long process. I call it a triathlon, not a sprint, because I think it's more complicated than a marathon.
Not one thing, yeah.
Yeah. So, from a social and emotional perspective, how did you and your husband Joseph manage that part of it? How did you stay strong and persistent, and how did you hang in there with him through all those really difficult years?
With a lot of patience. Also, not on all sides. It's a very tornado-like experience. Sometimes it can be, it was very calm. Sometimes the frustration of it can really go very deep. The self-esteem issues involved with realizing that your peers are doing something that everybody do, but much better than you, is really devastating to the ego. And we had to really work with, well, what are you good at? What are you good at? Nicholas is a very good artist. He has a lot of talent. We were able to back up and focus on that. Give him the opportunity to explore his strengths. Every person has a strength. Every person.
What about you?
For myself, it was constantly questioning, am I doing enough? Have I done enough? Have I spent enough time reading? Did we really read carefully? And when we're reading together, did I take him to tutoring enough? Is it the right tutor? Is he making enough? I mean, just a constant questioning. Am I doing enough? And I still question. I still look back and I say, well, you know, if I hadn't listened to so, if I had done this, you know, things could have been different. But as a parent, I once read a book called A Good Enough Parent. And so you strive for that. I think you just, for myself, I just strive for realizing that I have put everything out here. And I'm doing it for, in my mind, the right reasons. And I think that's really all that you can do.
That's a very, very important message. I really have a great deal of respect for you and what you've been able to accomplish outside of a formal structure. So it's the reason why I wanted to ask you to speak today, because I think there's so many people out there that are either in the early stages or have gone through what you've been through. And it's important for them to know that there is a map and you're not alone.
No.
And you can go from 3 points to 97 points, right?
Yeah.
And the other key thing is that you got to take care of yourself as the parents so that you can get through this year by year. So thank you so much, Sue. It was really lovely. It's a great story, and I'm really grateful that you would let us share that with us. So
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
you bet.
Have a wonderful day.